Your phono stage probably shipped set to a load that is actively degrading your cartridge, and it is the one setting almost nobody checks. The dealers sell you a moving coil cartridge and a phono stage in the same transaction, and somehow never mention that the default impedance on most stages will make a $1,500 MC sound worse than a $150 MM. So here is the question: what if the problem you have been blaming on your tone arm, your cables, or your room has been sitting on a DIP switch you have never touched? There is a record sitting on my turntable right now. It is a Japanese pressing of Kind of Blue, Columbia CS8163. I have played it maybe 200 times. I know exactly what it sounds like when everything is right. The brushwork on take 5 opens up wide, like the drummer is 3 feet to your left. The bass is round and unhurried. Miles does not pierce. He just appears in the room. For about 8 months, that was not what I was hearing. What I was hearing was a thin, bright, compressed version of that record, the kind of sound that makes you think the pressing is the problem, or the needle needs replacing, or maybe vinyl just is not what everyone says it is. I reseated the cartridge, I adjusted VTA, I swapped interconnects, I even bought a different mat. None of it moved the needle, not even a little. The problem was not the mat, it was not the cables, it was not the room. It was one number on one switch inside my phono stage, and when I found it and changed it, the record sounded like a completely different object. Not slightly better, completely different. The sound I had been chasing for 8 months cost me about 45 seconds to fix once I understood what I was looking at. I want to show you exactly what I did and why it worked, but first, I want to tell you the part that should make you uncomfortable, which is that every dealer who sold me my cartridge knew this setting existed, and not one of them mentioned it. Not when they handed me the cartridge, not when I called them 3 months later complaining that the treble sounded wrong. The first time anyone told me about input impedance was on a forum at 11 at night, in a thread buried under 7 replies about turntable mats. That is not an accident. Understanding this one setting means you stop buying things to fix a problem that does not need a new thing to fix it. It needs a different number on a switch you already own. Quick word before I go further. The old methods my family uses, there is more of it than fits in any one video. I gathered the whole of it into a book you can buy in our pinned comment below. The book is the long version. If you want it, it is there. I will not mention it again. So what is actually happening here, and why does a phono stage that costs $800 come set to a load that ruins the sound of most serious cartridges? That is the question I want to answer before I show you the fix. Because if you do not understand why this happens, you will fix it once and have no idea why it worked, and the next time it shows up, you will be back in the dark. Phono stages ship set to 47 kilohms. That is the standard. It has been the standard since moving magnet cartridges became the dominant format in the late 1960s. MM cartridges, the kind that come on most turntables under $500, the kind your parents had on their Dual or their Thorens. Those cartridges were designed for 47 kilohms. It is what they want. It is where they sound right. The entire industry settled on that number 50 years ago, and most phono stages have never questioned it since. The problem is that serious listeners eventually move to moving coil cartridges. MC cartridges have lower output. They have a fundamentally different internal structure. They need more gain, and they need a completely different input impedance, not 47 kilohms, usually somewhere between 10 ohms and 200 ohms depending on the specific cartridge. Run an MC cartridge into a stage set to 47 kilohms, and you are not getting the sound of that cartridge. You are getting a version of it that has been squeezed through the wrong window. The high frequencies become harsh and exaggerated. The bass loses weight. The soundstage collapses. The thing that makes a good MC cartridge worth its price, that ease, that openness, that sense of space, all of it gets crushed by one mismatched number. This is not a subtle difference. I have done this side by side, same cartridge, same record, same everything, just changed the load setting. The before and after is not a question of resolving detail or night and night clarity. It is more than that. It sounds like a different cartridge entirely, a worse one. So why does nobody tell you? Same reason nobody tells you to check the tire pressure on a new car. They assume you know. The people who have been doing this for 30 years all understand cartridge loading. They think about it the way they think about breathing. They stopped mentioning it in conversation because they assume it is obvious, and so it never gets passed down. The beginner buys the MC cartridge, plugs it into the stage set to 47 kilohms, hears a thin and airless sound, and concludes that either the cartridge is not as good as people say, or that vinyl has a ceiling they just cannot break through. It does not have a ceiling, it has a switch. Here is where it gets simple, and I mean genuinely simple. This is not a situation where I am about to tell you that you need an oscilloscope or a test record or 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon. The whole process takes about 15 minutes the first time you do it, less after that. The first thing you need is one number, your cartridge's internal impedance. This is listed in your cartridge's spec sheet. It will be in the documentation that came in the box or on the manufacturer's website under specifications, listed in ohms. If you cannot find the paperwork, go to Vinyl Engine. It is a free database with specifications for over 50,000 cartridges going back decades. Search your cartridge name. The number you are looking for will be listed as output impedance or internal impedance. It will usually be somewhere between 4 ohms and 40 ohms for a moving coil cartridge. Write it down. Now here is the rule. It is not complicated. Your phono stage's input impedance should be set to roughly 10 to 20 times that number. If your cartridge has an internal impedance of 10 ohms, you want a load between 100 and 200 ohms. If your cartridge internal impedance is 40 ohms, you want a load between 100 and 400 ohms. You do not need to be exact. You are not calibrating a laboratory instrument. You are finding the right neighborhood. Being in the right decade matters far more than hitting the precise number. The Denon DL-103 has an internal impedance of 40 ohms. Set your load to 100 ohms and it will sound like a completely different cartridge than it does at 47 kilohms. The Hana SL has an internal impedance of 6 ohms. Set it to 100 ohms and give it 20 minutes. That is the load that opens it up. The Ortofon Quintet Black has an internal impedance of 5 ohms. The spec sheet recommends greater than 50 ohms. Set it to 100. You will not regret it. Once you have your target number, you need to find where your phono stage actually makes that adjustment. This is where it varies by unit and where you need to spend a few minutes with your manual. Most mid-range phono stages use internal DIP switches, small banks of switches on the circuit board inside the unit, visible once you remove a few screws from the lid. The Parasound JC3 Plus does it this way. So does the Project Phono Box DS3. The manual will have a diagram showing you which switch positions correspond to which load values. Match your target number to the switch position, flip the switches, close the lid. Some stages put the adjustment on the rear panel so you never have to open anything. The Rega Phono MC has rear panel switches. The Gold Note PH-10 uses rear panel adjustment and goes down to 10 ohms, which covers even low impedance cartridges. If your stage has rear panel switches, this takes 30 seconds. A smaller number of stages use what are called resistor plugs, small modules you swap out that sit in an input socket and physically change the load. The musical surroundings, Nova 3 works this way. You buy a set of resistor plugs, each one a different value. You pull out the existing plug, push in the one that matches your target, and you are done. It is more tactile than a DIP switch, and some people prefer it because there is nothing ambiguous about a physical plug you can hold. If your phono stage has none of these options, if it is set permanently to 47 kilohms with no adjustment at all, then you have a stage designed for moving magnet cartridges. And if you are running a moving coil cartridge through it, you are leaving most of that cartridge's performance on the table. The one I recommend to anyone who wants a stage that handles all of this without tools or opening the lid is the Project Phono Box S3B. $399. It covers moving magnet and moving coil. The gain and load adjustments are all accessible from the outside of the unit. You can set it correctly for any MM or MC cartridge in about 2 minutes and never open the case. For the price, it is one of the only stages in this range that lets you do all of this without pulling out a screwdriver. Now, there is one more setting that matters, and it is worth checking while you are in there. Gain. Moving coil cartridges have lower output than moving magnet cartridges, usually between 0.2 millivolts and 0.6 millivolts, compared to 2 to 5 millivolts for most MM cartridges. To bring that signal up to the right level, your phono stage needs more amplification. Most stages designed for MC have a high gain setting somewhere between 60 and 70 decibels. If your stage is set to MM gain, usually around 40 to 44 decibels, it will not clip, but you will be turning your preamp up past the 2 o'clock position just to hit normal listening levels, and you will be dragging noise up along with the signal. Fix the loading first, then check the gain. If you are cranking the volume significantly just to reach comfortable levels, the gain setting is your second problem. The two are related, but they are not the same problem. Loading affects the character of the sound. Gain affects the level. After you have made the adjustment, sit down and give it 20 minutes before you evaluate anything. Cartridges are mechanical instruments. They have been resting, probably been moved slightly when you were working around the stage. They need a few plays to settle. Give the stylus time to warm up. Give yourself time to stop listening analytically and start listening to the music. What you are listening for. Does the treble sting less? Does it open up rather than press in? Does the bass have weight without becoming muddy? Do voices sit in a defined space rather than spreading across the full width of the speaker? If the answer to those questions is yes, you have fixed the problem. You have not bought anything new. You have not changed a single cable. You have changed one number on one switch, and the cartridge you already own is now doing what it was designed to do. I want to say something about what this costs people who do not know it. People trade in cartridges they think are defective. They buy expensive interconnects to warm up a sound that is cold because of loading, not cables. They blame the turntable, blame the pressing, blame the room, blame their hearing. Some of them decide that vinyl is overhyped and go back to streaming. They are not wrong that what they were hearing was disappointing. They are wrong about why. The vinyl revival has brought hundreds of thousands of people back to the format who have no one in their life to hand this information down to them. The audiophiles who know it assume it is basic. The forums cover it, but you have to know what you are looking for. The dealers should be explaining this at point of sale, the same way a camera store tells you to check the white balance setting when you buy a mirrorless body. They do not. I do not know whether that is because they assume competence or because a customer who understands this particular setting is a customer who does not come back to buy another cartridge. What I know is that it is the first thing I check now whenever something sounds wrong, before I move the tone arm, before I check the azimuth, before I look at anything. I pull up the cartridge spec sheet and I compare the internal impedance to what my phono stage is set to, because in my experience, that is where the problem is more than half the time. Here is what I want you to do tonight. Pull out your cartridge manual or go to Vinyl Engine and find your cartridge's internal impedance. Write it down, then multiply it by 10. That is the lower end of your target load range. Check your phono stage manual and find out where it adjusts. If it has internal DIP switches, take a photograph of the current setting before you change anything. Make the adjustment, put the lid back on, play a record you know well, give it 20 minutes, then come back here and tell me in the comments what cartridge you are running and what load you were set to before. I read every comment. I want to know how many people have been sitting on this without realizing it, because my guess is the number is significant. Next time, I am going to show you why VTA adjustments, the ones people agonize over for weeks, matter far less than this setting does, and in most cases matter far less than one other thing you probably have not checked. It is a 2-minute adjustment. It is completely free, and it has a bigger effect on musical timing and pace than any tweak I have ever made to a tone arm. Until then, find the number, check the switch. The record you already own sounds better than you think. Word count, 2,212. Expansion note. Acts 2 and 3 need expansion to reach 3,000 words. Expanding below. Expanded Act 2. Addition, weave into bridge after. It does not have a ceiling, it has a switch. Let me back up for a moment and explain why the industry missed this for so many people, because I think it matters. It is not malice. It is a communication gap built into how the hobby grew. In the 1970s and 1980s, when serious hi-fi culture was establishing itself, the people who understood cartridge loading were the same people who were hand-building phono stages from kits, who were reading the circuit diagrams, who were the kind of listeners who had 3 subscriptions to technical audio journals and could explain the operation of a JFET input stage at a dinner party. For those people, loading a cartridge was not a tip. It was table stakes. You just knew it the way a chef knows to season at every stage of cooking. What happened over the following decades is that the information got assumed rather than transmitted. The specialists talked to each other. The magazines covered it but assumed a technical reader. The internet helped in some ways. Forums like Steve Hoffman Music Forums and the Vinyl Engine database gave people a place to find this. But forums reward people who already know what to search for. If you do not know the term input impedance, you are not going to find it by searching "my phono stage sounds harsh." And so the gap opened up. The people who knew, knew. The people who did not know bought things trying to fix the problem and mostly made it worse. New cables, upgraded power supplies, different isolation platforms, all of them doing something, none of them doing the main thing. There is also something specific to the moving coil migration that made this worse. Moving coil cartridges used to be expensive enough that they were niche. If you were spending $1,000 on a cartridge in 1985, you probably had someone in your life who was serious enough to walk you through the loading question. The entry price for MC has come down substantially. You can buy a credible moving coil cartridge for $250 now. The Denon DL-103 has been around since 1962 and costs less than $300 and sounds extraordinary when it is loaded correctly. But the buyers at that price point in 2025 are often people who are new to the format and do not have a mentor in the room. They are figuring it out from YouTube and forums and the very limited guidance their dealer offers at the point of sale. I am not saying dealers are hiding this. I am saying that most retail audio shops have moved toward high-margin accessories and away from the kind of long technical conversation that used to happen when you bought a piece of serious equipment. The conversation that used to go, here is the cartridge, here is what your phono stage is set to, here is what we recommend you change it to, here is how. That conversation happens less now, and the gap it leaves is exactly the problem I am describing. So understand that when you do not know about this setting, you are not behind. You are in the majority. The majority of people running moving coil cartridges have never checked their input impedance load. Some of them have expensive systems and impressive record collections and have simply never heard their equipment perform at its actual capability. Not because they are not serious, because nobody told them. That is the real cost of this gap, not the money spent on cables, the listening hours spent thinking that a piece of equipment cannot do something it was fully capable of doing all along. That is the loss, and it is recoverable. Tonight, if you want, it is recoverable.